The story begins with a scene of a sparring match between two boys. A young nobleman, Weiss, arrogantly challenges his opponent, thinking that his opponent won't be able to win. A referee then declares that the sparring match has begun. Weiss says that he will humiliate the person who dares to challenge him in front of many people, and on the sidelines of the field, a female servant, Lilith, cheers him on. However, Weiss appears to be utterly defeated and lies helpless on the ground in heavy rain. It is introduced that the character who lost is Weiss Vansant, a despicable nobleman. The scene then shifts to a man in the modern world who has just finished a video game. He reflects on Weiss's tragic fate. After being defeated by the main character, Alan, he lost everything, becoming the Demon King's shield and dying. After that, the man appears to faint in front of his computer, and it ends with the man reincarnating as Weiss. A large mansion belonging to a nobleman is visible. In the dark corridor, someone can be heard crying. It turns out that person is a girl. It's visible that Weiss is torturing a servant girl with a whip. He even shows a cruel expression. However, at the same time, Weiss opens his eyes wide. He sees a girl tied up in front of him. With that confused look, he wonders who he is and where this is. Weiss becomes panicked and asks what happened. He realizes that he was just playing a game, and now he has awakened in a strange place with a girl tied up before him. He then falls silent when he sees the girl. The tied-up servant girl calls him Weiss-sama and asks about his condition. Weiss thinks that the girl is very beautiful. He realizes that he has seen this face before. Hearing about the name Weiss, he then looks toward the mirror and is shocked after he considers that he has become Weiss, that evil and despicable nobleman. He finally fully realizes that he has reincarnated as Weiss Vansant, the antagonist character from the school game Noblesse Oblige. He recalls Noblesse Oblige, a school fantasy game that he had completed many times. Weiss was the evil nobleman who became the challenger to the main character, Alan, in the Academy story part. He remembers Weiss's fate in more detail, a lowly bastard who endlessly tortured weak people using his power. After being defeated by the main character, Weiss, who lost everything, fell to become a servant of the Demon King, and at the end of his life, he died after being used as a shield. He recognizes the tied-up servant as Lilith Scarlet. He remembers that Weiss's hobby was torturing Lilith, and feeling disgusted with how cruel that bastard was, he wonders why Weiss did such things. A girl as beautiful as Lilith, he wants to immediately untie her bonds. However, he hesitates because he's worried that his sudden change will be considered strange. Even so, he can't let her continue to be tortured and decides to stop the torture for that day. He becomes shocked when he sees her. Seeing Lilith's neck is injured and her body trembling with fear because he feels sorry. He thinks to try that and decides to use healing magic Heal on Lilith. It's visible that the healing magic succeeded. This is healing magic that could be used from the beginning, but was hidden by the admin. He knew about this hidden magic from the game strategy book. He becomes shocked when Lilith keeps looking at him. To cover his actions, he pretends to be arrogant, saying that he didn't do it for Lilith. Lilith becomes silent because her master did something strange, but she then cries and says thank you to Weiss-sama. She is very shocked because she never knew Weiss-sama could use healing magic. The new Weiss feels guilty because Lilith thanks him even though the torture was caused by Weiss himself and made her become this obedient. He falls silent while thinking about something. He then calls Lilith. Sincerely, Weiss apologizes to Lilith for all his actions so far and promises not to do it again. Lilith appears confused by her master's drastic change, and time passes. In the dining room, a male servant can be seen serving food to Weiss. The family servant named Zavis Alden looks anxious, because usually Weiss would rage by throwing plates to the floor and saying his food doesn't taste good. Weiss then calls Zavis. He apologizes to Zavis for always wasting food, and says that today's food is very delicious. This makes Zavis become astonished. He then wants to say something to Master Weiss. Zavis is so moved that he cries, considering Weiss's words as noble words. The other servants are also moved, and Weiss, who sees this, thinks that he's just eating. He assumes that Weiss has grown mature, without knowing that the soul inside him has changed. Weiss reflects on how very terrible Weiss's behavior was in the past. He promises not to make those poor servants feel sadness again. Weiss then opens his wardrobe. Taking that whip, he will throw away his whip. and decides he must change his attitude a lot. He remembers that as a nobleman, he is required to enter a prestigious academy at age 15, which is 2 years from now. In the game story, Weiss lost in the battle exam, which destroyed his reputation and invited even more enemies. However, he thinks if he can win against the main character, his future might change. Weiss can only try it. He then throws a matchstick to burn the whip in the trash can. With strong determination, he declares he will try his hardest to avoid the destruction route. It's visible that Weiss is exhausted. He sits there while holding his wooden sword. Someone then calls his name, which makes him startled. That person turns out to be a woman. She is an S-rank adventurer named Milk Avitas. She asks Weiss if he's serious about his training. Weiss answers, of course. Weiss, who is already very tired, asks her to rest for a moment. Milk Sensei then tells him to rest to his heart's content, if he wants to be called a loser at the academy entrance exam. Hearing that makes Weiss have no other choice. While he trains with full instruction from Milk Sensei, Weiss has actually used his nobleman connections to employ an extraordinary teacher. It is introduced that Milk Avitas is the strongest swordsman in the kingdom's capital who should only appear at the end of the game. Weiss has asked her to train him mercilessly, and Milk Sensei, who turns out to be an acute sadist, gladly does so. Lilith then comes to visit her master. She gives the item that Weiss requested, and Weiss says thank you to Lilith. Lilith asks what the writing on it means. Weiss explains that the writing means fight until death. Weiss reflects that Noblesse Oblige is a death game, the highest difficulty game that can only be completed if played many times. If his preparation isn't perfect, he could die or be expelled from the academy. He must not waste a single second. Although he never trained his body in his previous life, he realizes that this is really difficult. But to learn swordsmanship and magic efficiently, he must improve his physical strength first. The training begins. First is posture training. After that, running with all his might to improve physical strength, until very heavy muscle training. He does that training repeatedly, from morning until night without stopping. He does it repeatedly, and repeats it again the next day. When night has arrived, he eats high-protein menu prepared by Zavis. 2 weeks since training began, Weiss apologizes to Zavis for troubling him. For injuries, he can recover with healing magic, but eating is also important for training the body. Thanks to Zavis supporting all his needs, he can avoid excessive training. 3 weeks since training began. In the early times, he was already exhausted by midday, and one day felt very long. But now, without him realizing, he can already endure until sunset. Because his body is already trained, he decides to call a magic teacher. He thinks he's tired of Milk Sensei's brutality. He hopes his teacher this time is kind-hearted, unlike Milk Sensei, who is cruel. He wonders what kind of teacher will come. The teacher then enters and greets him. She then removes her wizard hat. It turns out the magic teacher who came is Milk Avitas again. She introduces herself once more as an S-rank adventurer, which makes Weiss despair knowing this. Milk Sensei explains that besides swordsmanship, she is also skilled in magic. She says, please work together with Weiss-kun. Weiss complains to Zavis for calling a kind-hearted teacher, and Zavis says that Milk Sensei is a genius sword magic warrior who can use 2 elements and one of the 4 grand magics. When Milk Sensei hears that Weiss pleaded for a kind-hearted teacher, she says that she can teach Weiss-kun magic gently. Milk Sensei, with a sadistic smile, says to leave it to her, and she's also professional. The magic training from Milk Sensei turns out to be more cruel than sword training. Weiss wonders where the kind-heartedness is. He is forced to fill his body with mana for 2 hours non-stop. Milk Sensei explains that to use magic requires mana, and to increase mana capacity can only be achieved through hard work. Therefore, repeat this every day until Weiss-kun loses consciousness. This ends with Weiss losing consciousness and floating in the river, where Lilith chases to help him. Since that day, including basic magic training, Weiss also starts direct sparring training with wooden swords. Milk Sensei continuously defeats him in sparring matches, while showing the gaps that exist in Weiss-kun. Meanwhile, Lilith always supports him with healing magic, which makes Milk Sensei say that she found a good punching bag. Weiss, who is already lying there, he thinks this is strange, and wonders why he, who is basically a lazy person, can fight this hard. He reflects on his past life, where he was like a living corpse. He who always ran away from things he should face, gave up, irresponsible, and wonders about himself like that why he's fighting this hard. What's different from his current life and the past? 2 months since training began, while he is resting, Milk Sensei approaches him. She pats his head. With a sincere smile, she says that Wace-kun succeeded, his growth is quite rapid. Hearing that makes Wace blush. He asks if this is the gentle training that Milk Sensei meant. Milk Sensei answers correctly. She explains that every time Wace reaches a target, she will give him a reward in the form of head pats. Wace feels the comparison between his training suffering and the head pat reward is not equal. But Milk Sensei says that's not true, which makes Wace confused. He becomes distracted when Lilith comes to approach them. Lilith says that she brought lunch. Knowing that, Milk Sensei, who sees Lilith's sweet smile, she says that she only handles the bitter part, and for the sweet part, Wace-kun has received enough from others. Lilith advises Wace to never forget those who always support him so he can continue fighting. Hearing that, Wace then realizes something, that his reason for fighting until now is for them. Lilith, who always supports by his side, Zavis, who supports in the food department, and lastly, Milk Sensei, who turned his heart into a demon for his growth, thinking if there wasn't their help, he wouldn't be able to fight this far. He reflects that both his past self and the original Wace always thought of themselves. So there was no one who supported or reprimanded. He realizes that what he needs is a love that is sweet and bitter. With new awareness, he decides to stop living for himself alone. His goal now is no longer just to not be destroyed or die, but to show the results of his growth to the people who have helped him so they won't be sad. Standing between Lilith and Milk Sensei, he strengthens his resolve to avoid the destruction route for them and himself. Night arrives, and the next morning, hard training continues, and Milk Sensei states that the next target is 4 hours. She tells him to do it until death, which ends with Wace fainting again there while thinking that this is still difficult. It's visible that they have arrived at a city. Wace is accompanied by 2 beautiful girls, Milk Sensei and Lilith, while walking together in that city. People around him think he's on a date. Wace explains that they are in Ligbert City, the first city visited by the main character in the game. He hears someone say that person is cheating. He observes that security in that city is still rotten, evident from people fighting there. Wace then calls Milk Sensei. He asks who will be his sparring opponent. 3 months have passed since his training began. Wace and his group decided to conduct direct sparring tests in that city because the timing was considered right. He assumes that he will be tested in sparring with unclear thugs. Wace then becomes shocked. He sees Milk Sensei's smile full of happiness. Milk Sensei, with a mysterious smile, says that she has prepared the best opponent for Wace. Beside him, Lilith encourages Wace, while Wace himself feels very anxious. A group of thugs notice Wace's group and comment rudely about Milk Sensei and Lilith's beauty. One of the thugs says, "How dare that arrogant brat bring beautiful girls here?" Wace warns the others to watch their words so they won't die at Milk Sensei's hands. Wace considers Ligbert City the worst city, a den of bastards. He thinks that although Milk Sensei can take care of herself, he must protect Lilith. Lilith appears disturbed by the thug's words. Wace, who hears it, feels worried. Milk Sensei tells Lilith to ignore that bunch of trash. Lilith smiles and agrees with Milk Sensei's words. However, Wace senses a terrifying intent from Lilith, although he tries to convince himself that it's just his feeling. They arrive at the Adventurers Guild. Inside the Adventurers Guild, a group of thugs appears to block Wace's path and tells Wace to get out of this place. Milk Sensei explains to Wace that his opponents are the Boudin brothers, a group of criminals whose crimes are very serious, including sexual harassment, robbery, and slave trading. However, they are always let go because they bribe. Milk Sensei says that the guards who accepted bribes have been arrested. And now, Wace's task is to deal with those 3 brothers. Milk Sensei tells Wace not to hold back against those criminals because they are suitable opponents for Wace. Wace, who hears it, understands and wants to go home. But Milk Sensei stops him. She then wants to say something to Wace. Milk Sensei advises Wace that although he is strong and has guts, his experience is still 0. Therefore, he must quickly gather experience because someday he will definitely fight. She also says that if there's another opportunity later, she can't guarantee she'll be behind to protect Weiss. Milk Sensei reminds that many people die in their first fight because of lack of experience and no one accompanying them. However, Milk Sensei assures Weiss that she will help him if he's in danger, so Weiss can advance without worry. Hearing that makes Weiss feel happy because there's strong support. Suddenly, Milk Sensei disappears. Weiss, who panics, shouts looking for Milk Sensei. Feeling deceived because he's already committed, Lilith also disappears. He dared to challenge those thugs to fight because he thought he would be helped. He wonders how this happened. It's impossible for him to cancel this now, and the only way is to face them. He just needs to cut off one of their arms. He doesn't have to end their lives, even if he's serious. He's not sure he can win. Although they look like thugs, they are quite trained. Upon arriving at the narrow alley, whether he likes it or not, he has to fight. He has to think of a plan before that happens. Weiss remembers when he was about to challenge them to fight. He remembers that before they disappeared, Milk Sensei advised him to remember what she had taught him, and with that, Weiss would be fine. Weiss then thinks about what Milk Sensei taught him. It's visible that they are watching Weiss from a distance. Lilith feels worried, however. Milk Sensei calms her down. Milk Sensei believes that this can't be called a first fight if Weiss knows someone will help him, so she deliberately left Weiss alone. Milk Sensei also promises to help if the situation is really dire. Lilith, who is at a tavern. A group of bandits surrounds her. They praise her beauty and say they happen to meet here. Those bandits state that they are the rulers of that area and are lacking women to play with tonight. It's visible that there are several girls already captured there. This makes Lilith show such an evil expression toward the bandits. Suddenly, one of the bandits screams in pain when hit by an attack. This makes the two bandits in front hear it. When they look back, it's visible that one of his hands has already been cut off. It turns out that bandit was attacked by Weiss. The two bandits in front of Weiss fall silent when they see him. Weiss, who appears with a fighting stance, he thinks to take the first step. He remembers Milk Sensei's teaching about the most important thing in battle being the element of surprise. The first attack that takes advantage of gaps is the most effective attack of anything. Even a fighting expert or magic expert will die if attacked before they can dodge or activate protective magic. The two bandits who see this incident, they then become angry, and Weiss understands that the key to winning a fight is moving before the opponent. When that bandit is about to attack Weiss from behind, he quickly kicks him very hard, and one of the bandits will attack using a meat knife. Weiss, who sees that trajectory direction, he counters with his slash. He reflects that he always thought he would deal with problems later, but leaving it to time won't solve anything. Now he is determined. If he already knows what must be done, he will decide it in an instant. He states he must change from his lazy self. It's visible that those three bandits have been successfully defeated. His surprise attack succeeded. He thinks that if he fought in the narrow alley, they would be more prepared and he would have no chance of winning. By moving first, he ensured his victory. Someone gives 100 points to Weiss. Milk Sensei and Lilith appear again. Milk Sensei only gives him 70 points, saying if it were her, she would have attacked directly since at the Adventurers Guild. Meanwhile, Lilith enthusiastically praises Weiss and gives him 200 points. Seeing Lilith and Milk Sensei are fine there, Weiss complains about being left alone, but Milk Sensei just laughs and she apologizes. After doing this, makes Weiss feel exhausted. He then looks toward Lilith and sees there are bloodstains on her clothes. Weiss then asks Lilith that there's something on her clothes. Lilith then covers it, and she says that's just Weiss-sama's feeling. It's visible that there are several girls and a bar owner who look shocked and frightened at the same time. Someone wonders that more than 20 bandits have been arrested. There are no casualties. Those bandits were only tortured until they couldn't speak. Besides that, the Boudin Brothers criminal group, successfully captured thanks to Weiss Vansant's help. A girl there can be seen reflecting upon knowing this news. That girl who appears to be thinking about someone named Weiss. Thanks to his service, the Vansant family receives a bundle of gold and a letter of thanks. Weiss feels that ignorance is peace.